Now it's time to actually create our Angular app. That is, we are going to make our own AngularJS files to have our app actually work. Right now, we don't have it actually working. We have it where we have some template code, so the Angular template code with some conditionals and stuff there, but we're actually not doing a whole lot of the logic in the JavaScript code, which is where it should be. We should be doing a lot of that logic in there. Now, the things that we did here, those are still useful and they still will be used in some contexts. But when it comes to making a single page application, we have to start now breaking up all of our stuff into our own components. And what we saw here was called a directive. We'll actually show you how to make your own directives as well, so you can kind of play around with that. So directives are basically an improvement onto basic HTML. So class is a type of directive. It's an attribute of, any sort of HTML tag. But when they created HTML, they didn't know that it would get as good as it is today. But it's still a very core component to what the web is all about. So what Angular does is picks up where HTML left off and just makes the HTML better by allowing us to do stuff like directives. This is an example of a directive, and so would your tag be if you created something like that. And you can. We actually can create something like this that changes what's actually in there or updates to what's in there, much like when we use an H1 tag. We know that it's for a header, and we can do all sorts of stuff in there too. So that's another promise that Angular is really good at. So what we need to do to get there is actually create our own Angular app. So inside of JS, we're going to make a new folder in here, and we're just going to call it app. And inside of this app folder, this is where we're going to put all of our app JavaScript code. We might actually separate things a little bit. We might put some more folders in, but for now, this is how we're going to do it. So let's go ahead and make a new file in here, and we're going to call it app.module.js. And then I'm going to make one other file, and I'm going to call it app.config.js. So the name app, the folder of app, is really just kind of saying the entire app is going to be inside of this folder. The entire Angular app will be in this folder. And then app.config.js and app.module.js is just going to be related specifically to that app. It's not like you don't have to call it that in particular, but it makes it a lot easier when you call it something general like this. So when you go into the future and you work on multiple projects, it's going to be a lot easier to figure out where the app configuration is if you call it app.config.js. Kind of like standardizing the way it is. Now, it will work if you call it something different because JavaScript works like that. But if you follow something like this, it will keep you in better practice long term, and that's what we would prefer to have. So in app.module.js, we're just going to type out use strict. I'll explain that later, but for now, just write it in, and we'll do angular.module, and we're going to do something in here, and then put just an empty array and a semicolon. So when I say we're going to do something in here, we actually can name our app something. So we can name it anything that you want. Like if you were doing coding for entrepreneurs, we called it CFE. If you were doing try Django, you might call it TD or try Django or something like that. This is where you name your app. And what I'm going to just call it is try, as in try Angular. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and come back into our index file. And we're going to say ng-app now is equal to try. Because you might be wondering, hey, can you have multiple Angular apps on one page? The reason you do that is odd, but you probably can because of how we're going to be naming it. So in this case, we're naming it try, and this is it. This is a basic core thing. Once we actually start using third-party services or our own modules, we will actually be coming back to this quite a bit. So that is also true if I go ahead and copy this and go into the configuration folder, the configuration file. This is where I can configure even more stuff. So these two work in hand together, but app.module.js is really just kind of declaring the module. It's saying like, this is an Angular module. We're calling it try. App.config.js just extends off of that module. And since it extends off of it, we can get rid of the rest of that stuff and just do dot and then press enter, config, parentheses, and we're going to put a function in here, just an empty function to make sure that it works. And that's it. So later we will come back and actually run this configuration function and do some things to it once we get to that point. But for now, we're not at that point. So we just wanted to create the file to have it there. We go back into our index, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this old one that we had, and I'm going to put this new code underneath our actual Angular code. So you want to make sure that you're loading Angular first, and then you have your code below it or your app code below it. And we're going to just put app in front of here. And of course, the first one was app.module.js and then app.config.js. So we save that. Everything should work fine. If I refresh in here, I see that nothing changed, right? So if I actually type and do some font stuff, whoops, we need to write Justin, I think. There we go. And we do some font stuff. This should actually still work, or parts of it will. So that's pretty cool. So now that we have this, we have now declared officially our Angular module. We initialized our Angular module in our own JavaScript files. So in the next one, what we need to do is create a controller. That's something we'll do in just a moment.